Hi, everyone. Welcome to the case of two coasts addressing redevelopment challenges in Rome, New York and Oregon City, Oregon. I'm Joelle Greenland, Senior Planning Consultant for the Center for Creative Land Recycling. I will be your host, cruise director for the next hour while we listen about to these great projects. And we're going to start off with some introductions. First, little bit about the Center for Creative Land Recycling. We are a 26-year nonprofit that's dedicated to the sustainable, equitable, and responsible reuse of underutilized and environmentally impacted properties. We're also EPA technical assistance to brownfield communities in regions 9 and 10, and also assist states across the country. We educate and advocate and hopefully get second acts for these properties. And a little bit more about what we do is technical assistance. We do national webinars, trainings. We partner with awesome organizations like the Counselors of Real Estate. We do newsletters.
Joelle, sorry to interrupt, Joelle.
Yeah.
We're not seeing your screen or the slides.
Oh,
you could pull those up just really quick.
I'm so sorry. Okay, now does
there we go.
Okay,
Perfect.
Okay, we're gonna just take two. So welcome, Case of Two Coasts, addressing redevelopment challenges in Rome, New York and Oregon City, Oregon. And I was talking about the Center for Creative Land Recycling, so we're just going to go through these slides since you have heard me. And here's where we stopped. Thanks again, Devin. So how we can help you, there's a bunch of things that we can do, staying on track, getting you started and getting you the resources and facilitating with whatever projects that you have regarding land recycling. So our executive director is Jean Hammerman. I've already introduced myself, but I've been in the field for over 30 years. And I'm also joined on this webinar by Christian Mercurio. He is the Vice President of Planning and Development at MV Edge, which is Mohawk Valley Edge. And I will let the speakers also do a little bit of their own introductions when we get to them. And Gramsci Grady, CRE, and he is a partner at the Taft Law Firm. They will be talking about the Rome Cable Complex 4 in Rome, New York. Our next project, Tumwater Village in Oregon City, Oregon. Ryan Webb, Engineering Planning Manager for the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, and also Cassandra J. Francis. She's a CRE and also an ICP Principal at Confederated Strategic Planning. And then the Counselors of Real Estate, I am going to hand it over just for a bit to Stephen R. Norris, who is the chair of the Consulting Corps Steering Committee, and he will talk a little bit about the Counselors of Real Estate. Steve?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this webinar. The Counselors of Real Estate was established in the 1950s and consists of about 1,000 practitioners in the United States, Europe, Asia, who are in invitation only invited to join the counselors. And we have a wide variety of practitioner specialties within the counselors: real estate law, development, planning, evaluation, academics, all sorts of folks come together to form the Counselors of Real Estate. And in 1990, we formed a group called the Consulting Corps. We have been involved in a wide variety of really unusual and interesting projects throughout the United States and also a couple overseas. This past year, our team was, in 2021, involved in assisting the community of Paradise, California, as they recovered from a devastating wildfire in California with a loss of 14,000 homes. I led that team. It was a complete honor and privilege. And if you would have any interest in this, what I'm going to do at your leisure is, in a minute here when I'm done chatting, just put into the chat box a link to the Consulting Corps so you can learn a little bit more about what we're doing. There's a video that's very helpful. We have 5 different projects we're involved with currently. We also work hand in hand with the National Association of Realtors, who is funding our efforts as we are pro bono. There's nobody making any money and the counselors doing this work. And it really is a remarkable group of folks who are volunteering for these teams. Also, the counselors itself has a foundation, and the Consulting Corps Foundation, or the counselors, larger group foundation, is also supporting the efforts of the Consulting Corps. So we're tickled to be a part of this presentation today, and you're going to get to hear from some of the sharpest counselors I certainly know of, and learn a lot more about how we're bringing some hope and change and opportunities to think outside of the box throughout the country. There's our Paradise Project. And if you have any other questions, go ahead and let myself or Samantha DeCoven know. Her email is here. She is our in-house genius running the Consulting Corps efforts full time. And we're just tickled to be a part of this again today and look forward to further involvement. So I think I hand this back to Joelle now. Is that right?
You do. You are faster than my unmute button. So thanks, Steve. Great presentation. And so this all started with a solicitation for projects. We had a call for projects across the country, and we received many. And after a thorough evaluation process, City of Rome and Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, these projects were the finalists. So we were really happy to participate with CRE and their prestigious group of counselors and all their amazing knowledge and backgrounds. And I'll let the CRE folks on this call talk about those teams because they were very diverse and they came from all over the country. So really enriches the process with having those various perspectives, not only from disciplines, but also the environments that they're coming from, whether it's urban or rural, different states. So having said that, we're now going to go into the Ronde Cable Complex 4 in Rome, New York, which is part of the Mohawk Valley. It is in central New York. And Christian Mercurio and Graham Grady, I will turn it over to you now to give the background and context and the whole visit. I was really happy and privileged to be a part of this team, as well as Gene Hammerman from CCLR. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
All right, thanks, Joelle, and thanks to CCLR and CRE for everything you've done for us. Things have, really kind of taken off since we've met you. So this is a real privilege to be here, and I am really happy to have to be sharing the stage with Graham. I will do my best to be short. I don't know why my camera's not working, but it's probably best for the rest of the country who's watching this. So Rome, New York is a small city by most measures, about 35,000 people in upstate New York along the I-90 corridor, so, sandwiched between Syracuse and Utica. And it in the early days of the Erie Canal, it was, one of the premier manufacturing communities, and we really specialized in copper and wire and cable products and steel. So heavy metals everywhere. So this led to large facilities with even larger legacies that, that they've left to communities, good and bad. So Rome Cable itself was a pretty sprawling complex that was taken over by the Rome Cable Corporation in 1936. And for almost 100 years employed, thousands of people over that time period, but, eventually shuttered in 2003 and left behind, 600,000 plus square feet of vacant, contaminated facilities, in addition to about 40 to 50 acres of impacted property. So so that's where we began. And Joelle, are the slides up?
They are.
Okay, good. Okay, I can see them.
They are.
Thanks.
You're now on the context slide.
All right, so context. So what you're looking at right now are kind of the prior conditions, just probably about a year before the CRE actually showed up. So again, large, everybody has seen this, like this could be the same thing in Detroit or anywhere else, right? So we were fortunate. The community really stepped up. We, to truncate about 15 years of history, we formed a pretty much a single purpose, not-for-profit called Ronde Community Brownfield Restoration Corporation, with the sole function of acquiring and dealing with the issue. Basically, we couldn't get anyone else to deal with the liability and the environmental legacy. So this was a brand new corporation formed by a few real visionary risk takers in the community and thought leaders as well. So we were able to finally grind down, the DEC, who had spent years with us on it. And in 2019, we were able to grind them down and, to spend about $13 million helping us raise the buildings and remove, PCBs among about, 15 to 16 other major contaminants. So what we're left with, and I think if you want to just go to the prior slide really quickly, Joelle. So what we were left with is that aerial view that you're looking at now, which, consists of about a 2-acre concrete pad and a bunch of kind of remediated, classic looking, remediated but not restored property. And at that point is where we were given the opportunity to engage CRE. We were fortunately selected, and the team was selected, with a specific skill set to help us with our specific problems. So I think later on you're going to see a really cool project that's at a different stage of development. This is kind of in that interim stage where, like, all right, we finally got the building down, we got the major contaminants out of the ground. Now what? Right. So I'm gonna kind of pause there because I think really like to hear how Graham's perspective on when CRE came to the table.
Terrific. Christian, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for participating in this webinar. We're very excited to share more information about the Councils of Real Estate and our visit and the work we are trying to do to assist in the redevelopment of this site. My name is Graham Grady. I'm a partner in the law firm of Taft, Stettinius, and Hollister, and I'm based here in Chicago. My background is in land use and development. Prior to representing developers and property owners, I worked in municipal government in Chicago as the zoning administrator, as a buildings commissioner, and also as the head of our public housing agency at a time during which we were demolishing the old 1950s, 60s high rises and finding ways to redevelop those sites. And so there's a little bit of background that's somewhat relevant here. And I've worked in multiple industry sectors, including industrial and hazardous sites. So the CRE team, there were 6 of us that came from all over the country, as Joelle mentioned. It included appraisers, people with financial background, developers, legal, environmental, brownfield experience, new ground up development, really a broad range of backgrounds and skill sets. What we did to prepare for this was we read a number of the reports that had been prepared by Christian and the other state and local and nonprofit and for-profit entities there to give us a real background on the history, attempts at redevelopment, and what many of the challenges were. Basically, the Councils of Real Estate does not come into a site that's easy to be redeveloped. The CRE, Counseling Corps, only comes in when basically everything imaginable has already been tried. And so that's a challenge that the counselors enjoys. And that's why we really love these projects, because it's going to take a different approach, some objectivity, different set of experiences to try to solve the problem. So here we had the good fortune as being sort of outsiders, which was sort of a good thing. We were able to meet with, I think the phrase that was used was, we had not had everyone in the room at the same time ever until the Councilor Corps came to Rome. Secondly, someone stated that every species of stakeholder was involved in the communication with the councils of real estate. So again, we reviewed many of the reports that have been written. We spent a lot of time on the phone and on Zoom calls. This was all during COVID with Christian and the other stakeholders there. And we had, it seemed like weekly calls to understand what was going on with this site, what had been attempted before, what the environmental condition was, what the state and local governments had attempted to do, what brokers had attempted to do, what, some people who looked at acquiring and redeveloped the site had attempted to do, and what those obstacles were. So that by the time we actually arrived in Rome, we really felt we could sort of hit the ground running. At the same time, we were not overly confident that we had the answers. It really wasn't that. It was really to make the most of our time in Rome by trying to be prepared in advance. And we also had terrific assistance from Jean and Joelle at the center, as well as the staff of the councils of real estate who have strong real estate backgrounds as well. So we arrived there. As I mentioned, we were from all over the country. We toured the site, we toured the environs, so we could really sort of, try to hit the ground running. And of course, what we found, as Christian has described, was, a long time vacant, abandoned, polluted, urban location that had been sort of, sort of off the grid and forgotten about. Although it's on a sort of off of a main drag in Rome, it's really somewhat isolated. It's nestled in between some existing cable and wire manufacturers that are very, dirty, smokestack plants, as well as a brand new facility directly across the street, which is a modern HVAC assembly plant where you could literally eat off the floor. So there were a lot of sort of real contrasts here. It was also immediately adjacent to a residential neighborhood. And so, there were a lot of sort of conflicting components here where some people were saying we need more, industrial rebirth, and other people were saying we need this to be a pedestrian walkable area. And so we faced a number of challenges. We met with many stakeholders, they're local in the community. We met with the surrounding businesses. We understood, we learned about their challenges on whether they were going to further invest in industrial equipment and manufacturing there, or whether they were going to move their plant and operations to other locations. We met with the folks in the downtown area where there's been a big rebirth. We met with the folks up at Griffith Air Force Base, which had been converted in part to a new high-tech, modern, cutting-edge development, including, commercial strips and $700,000 townhouses. And so, we're trying to take all this in to try to figure out what's the best solution, what can be done here. We met with the mayor, we met with elected officials, we met with the Chamber of Commerce. We met again with a broad range of stakeholders. We found out what the county had done, what the city had done, what the state had done, federal opportunities, et cetera. What we learned was that jobs was a big component. What can be done here to bring new jobs? What can be done to revitalize the tax base? What can be done to encourage further investment in the surrounding area? We looked at potential commercial opportunities here. As you saw on the slide, there's about a 20-story, maybe taller, building there, and we're saying, well, what can we do there? Because you can see that from basically anywhere in Rome. What can we do to use that tower to attract attention here? Can we put, a parachuting operation or a climbing wall inside of it? Can we paint it? Can we illuminate it? What can we do to focus attention? And so there were challenges, large and small, and we worked to understand them and to make some recommendations. We looked at all the things that real estate people look at. We looked at the market data. We looked at what a financial pro forma might be for any range of building, anything from a small maker lab to a big industrial project and everything in between. We looked at some comparable redevelopment sites, some in Chicago and from other places. on more modern manufacturing, cleaner manufacturing. So we looked at a lot of different options, including some spec buildings, potential warehouse space. We ran some numbers and put together a range of performance. We worked with Jean and Joelle with regard to the environmental condition and what that was and what could be done there. And then we put together some action steps. We developed some plans for some temporary uses or some interim uses, such as food trucks or concerts or farmers markets, just to get some people activation there. We looked at the possibility of using it for truck parking, just because there were some truck parking and traffic issues right there. So we looked at a broad range of reuses there. I already mentioned the tower, and we consulted with everybody there and bounced our ideas off of them. We wrote up a report and communicated that back to the mayor and all the stakeholders there. And we really don't consider our work as done. Although our report is complete, we view this as something that is a work in progress, and the counselor team will remain available to Christian and the other stakeholders there in Rome, because until that site is redeveloped, we don't feel that our work has been completed. I may have gone on, Joelle, a little beyond my time, but that's the summary that I wanted to provide.
It was fantastic, Graham. You get A+. I also want to just say, the two of you, just a quick comment, right? So Christian talked about the pad that was here. You guys also had this challenge, right? Of, great about the interim uses, right? But the wetlands, right? Going in, we heard 40 acres, right, Graham? And then we heard, yeah, but how much of those acres were really developable, Graham?
Like zero, maybe 2 or 3. Right.
It was 10 in the front here, but you're right. None of the wetlands could be developed. So everybody got pretty creative with possible interim uses as far as an animal sanctuary, or how do we tie it into the Clifton ditch, right? And right,
Clinton's ditch. Joel, if you go to the
ditch,
next or 2 slides down,
let's go
this is kind of a perfect segue into zooming out, looking at all of the all of the land uses. Like Graham said, this was kind of nestled among just about every urban land use there is, and it was one of, obviously one of the oldest developments in the city, one of the oldest neighborhoods, and on one of the busiest commercial corridors, but, had its, kind of, isolated challenges. So coming, this was a neat exercise because we had to kind of challenge ourselves and CRE team and CCLR to like, how do we find the perfect balance that, the whole reason we got into this is because the quality of life in that neighborhood was compromised because of this just kind of like monstrosity that, who knows, could be poisoning their children or drinking water, like that's the perception. So we got into this to make the neighborhood a better place to live, right? And so we don't want to go into this like, just thinking about jobs and constructing something that, okay, here we go again. Now we have more trucks and we have more smokestacks. We just kind of like, perpetuated that cycle. So this was a really good exercise. And Graham kind of touched on something that like, that objectivity is really what counted here, because we get so kind of focused on this kind of, very hyper local thinking. And, even though we've been at it for 15 years, and the community's all stepped up and everybody's engaged, we get mired down in like the minutia of contamination and land use and all this stuff. But one of the things, it's small but big, right? Like they came out of the recommendations is that, hey, you guys should, scrub that title a little bit, make sure, when you're ready, you're really ready. Sure enough, like we're like, all right, good idea, guys, and a couple of weeks later, we start doing the title research and we found that we had like $150,000 in tax liens and all this stuff on the property. So like very basic stuff, but like we were like dealing with all these complex issues. We just finished a $13 million cleanup and we're, we think we're really, really making some progress. And like, wow, we didn't even fundamentally, like one of the most fundamental things. And that's, these are like the value of having these like real experts at the table. And I just wanted to kind of say this before I forgot, like, it's very timely reference, but like, so the DART spacecraft, right? It went and knocked this little asteroid off its humdrum trajectory, and just by a few percentage or degrees or whatever, that's kind of what CRE did for us. We were kind of like orbiting in this perpetual circle. We kind of hit this, just this kind of like doldrum, and they came, kind of knocked us off our trajectory a little bit, and now we've got a ton of momentum back, and there's some real value there. We were really appreciative.
Awesome. Great. Well, we're definitely going to get back into some of the minutia later, but first we're going to transition to Tonawanda Village, Oregon City, Oregon. So thank you, Graham. Thank you, Christian. We'll be picking you guys back up in a few more slides. Now I'm going to introduce Ryan Webb and Cassandra Francis again. And Ryan, you have been living, breathing this site for almost 2 years, probably a little bit more than 2 years. I also had the pleasure and the honor of being on site here and seeing these magnificent falls up close also, as well as the former Blue Heron site and the buildings. And my hat is off to you with this site and what you have done. And I can't wait for everybody on this webinar to hear this story. So without further ado, Ryan, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joelle. So my name is Ryan Webb. I'm the engineering and planning manager for the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. And it really is a pleasure to present in front of you today. I could talk about this project every day of the week and always have a different topic for each of those days. It really is a fantastic site to be part of. But I also really want to thank CRE and CCLR for some great help, guidance, and some real benefits to help us move this project along and ultimately help us realize our redevelopment goals of the site. So Cassandra, before I go chime in, I'd like you to introduce yourself as well, please.
Hello, I'm Cassandra Francis. I was on the team of the consulting corps with Ryan and others in Oregon City. And I have a urban planning, real estate and construction planning practice in Chicago, based in Chicago.
Thank you. So people aren't familiar with the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. We are a federally recognized tribe within the state of Oregon. Our ceded lands range from Northern California to Southwest Washington, really within Western Oregon. Those lands were ceded to the federal government through various ratified and unratified treaties. And this particular site here in Oregon City is within the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855. The land within that boundary was ceded to the federal government, and at the same time, our people were removed to the reservation that we have in Grand Ronde. That piece of the ceded lands within the Willamette Valley Treaty really is we have a deep cultural connection to this site, and that was predominantly one of the reasons why the tribe purchased this property in 2009. The tribe, the descendants from Grand Ronde, from this area, were really the keeper of the falls. They invited other tribes, other bands to the site to fish here at the falls and tell stories. But our people, our descendants, were the keepers of these falls. This particular property, like I said, we purchased it in 2019. The site itself was a former paper mill. It was actually former mill of every kind that you can think of, from flour to woolen to lumber and eventually paper. The site itself is around 26 acres. It's about a half mile of river frontage along the Willamette River. And like Joel mentioned, it's also nestled right by the Willamette Falls, which is really a kind of a hidden gem there within Oregon City. It's actually the second largest waterfalls by volume within the US. So it's really amazing that you've got this fantastic natural beauty kind of hidden away from the public at the southern end of our site. So with that, this, like I said, this area was ceded lands, and the tribe has a deep cultural connection. We have many villages and say residents that resided here, fished, and kind of were the gatekeepers of the falls. Really from the story time up to where we had kind of the western expansion in the early 1800s, and then ultimately our removal in 1855 to our reservation. During that time, really from the removal to when the tribe purchased in 2019, this became a very much of an industrial era. Like I mentioned, it went through various different forms of mills, and you can see that through the structures that still stand there today. We have remnants of the old flour mill, the old woolen mill, even little pieces of the lumber mill when it was there, and then ultimately the paper mill, and as it expanded throughout the site as well. The tribe purchased the property in 2019. The paper mill itself went into bankruptcy back in 2011, and really it stayed as a vacant property until the tribe purchased the property. The property itself has, I think, more than 55 structures on it as the mill activities expanded. They created more buildable flat land, so a lot of the time they infilled some of the river channels, alcoves, and created a lot of structures throughout the site. And it today is really littered with structures that we are actively demoing as we speak. And it's very strange. Sometimes when you walk down the site, you wouldn't know that you've got the river right next to you, or you've got the beautiful falls to the south. Next slide, please. So after the tribe purchased the property, we kind of set about what our goals, what our vision was for the site. And I think beginning of 2021, we published a vision document for the site, really what our priorities are, how we wanted to go about revitalizing this property. And I think the thing that's very typically different to a lot of economic developments, a lot of regeneration, restoration type projects, is that the tribe, because of its deep cultural connection, its priority for the site was healing and restoration. And that healing and restoration kind of comes through with restoring river channels that were filled in as part of mill activities, restoring shorelines, restoring native vegetation to those shorelines. That really is a priority for the tribe and how we want to ultimately develop this site. And then with that, another priority, a high priority for the tribe, is public gathering, access to the site. This site, because it's been a mill for so long, was closed off to the public. You couldn't come onto the site. You couldn't enjoy the sound and the feel of the river. You couldn't enjoy the sound and the feel of the falls. So really allowing people back into the site, designated spaces where people can gather and enjoy the site as well as creating place that the tribe can do private ceremonies as well, and have, again, waterways were always the tribes have a deep connection to waterways, so being able to have ceremonies right here on the river, right by the falls, is very special for the tribe as well. And then ultimately, with the purchase of this property and the cost to do that and to remediate it from an environmental standpoint, demolition and redevelopment, there is an economic component to that. So we really were looking at what that economic development piece was, what we would do. And really it was just the timing was perfect. We kind of came out with this vision document, and then we started to work with both CRE and CCLR about what that development of the site would be, with our priorities and with the economic development piece as well. What I will say is, the kind of current work that we're completing right now, this is a brownfield site. We have been fortunate to get a grant from EPA, a multi-purpose grant to help us with environmental remediation work. So we're currently working closely with EPA and Oregon DEQ to continue investigation work, really trying to figure out all of the contamination that's throughout the site, and then ultimately remediation work after that. We're also actively demoing a lot of those structures that are on the site. Again, a lot of those structures have asbestos, lead paint, all of those fantastic materials that they used to use many decades ago. So we're going and abating all of that work as well. I'm trying to make this site safe. To date, we have demoed, I think it's close to 15 structures. By the end of this year, we'll be around 25 structures, I think 24, 25 structures. So we're about 40% of the way there. So we're again really trying to make a big effort to get to that point of having a clean slate for the site, so we can look at restoration and bring the people back and economic development. Next slide, please, Joelle. So for us, like I said, this really was a unique project, and we really needed, I guess, a unique team, and that is definitely what CRE provided to us. The team had an amazing kind of diverse experience that was able to provide a lot of feedback, a lot of great input to us. They really understood what our goals were for this site. And those goals and that vision is definitely a different one than most kind of urban developments. They really understood that, we value the healing and the conservation restoration over kind of the return on investment. They came up with some fantastic recommendations in their report that were really, again, outside of the box thinking, because this is an outside of the box type development. And the recommendations throughout that report, there's a lot of detail and a lot of great points that we can take forward to ultimately make this a fantastic development for the tribe and for the tribal people, but also the community there within Oregon City. So I think with that, kind of a segue into yourself, Cassandra, to talk about CRE's input on this site.
Thank you, Ryan, and really a great background on the site and what Ryan and the rest of the team from the tribe is actually undertaking currently. So we can go to the next slide, please. So I want to talk a bit just about the team itself. And again, I want to thank Ryan, Stacia, and Kristen, who were the team members from the tribe that we worked with very closely throughout all of the interviews that we did and kind of strategy sessions. Some great leadership for the tribe, and really, the tribe is very lucky to have these really outstanding professionals leading their process. CCLR, Jean, Joelle, and Ellie were also on site with Ellie and Joelle were on site with us, and our team from the Consulting Corps. Gary was our team leader, myself, Robert Green, Mary Hashem, and Al Victors. I will say one of our members was not able to be there in person due to COVID. And another person was on crutches. You'll see her in some of the photographs, limping around the site after recovering from knee surgery. But we really had a great time there collecting information and trying to understand the site in a fairly short time frame. Next slide, please. I want to just try to get a little bit of perspective on the number of people that we talked to. And this is just about everyone that we spoke to. So we talked directly with the Grand Ronde Tribal Council, with many other consultants that the Grand Ronde Confederation is actually working with now, with the local chambers of commerce, the Portland General Electric, which next to the site, there's a large hydro dam that is adjacent to the site and actually has an easement right across the site, who is a stakeholder in this entire area, but certainly needs to be a partner with the forward movement of this site as well, but also with city and county commissioners and many other organizations that were set up to either represent public access on the site, cultural ties to other local organizations, tourism, etc. And of course, EPA and the Oregon State Environmental Organization as well was folks that we talked with, given the current state of the site and the work that was being undertaken. Next slide, please. The consulting core team was, again, as we've said before on the Ronde team, a very broad background. So we had appraisers, we had CCLR and brownfield redevelopment experience, construction and demolition, urban planning, financing and development strategy, which is one of the things we were trying to lend to Ryan and his team, because they really were underway with pre-development of the site. And as Ryan mentioned, with the environmental remediation and demolition. Next slide, please. So as Ryan had talked about, the unique client, project, and goals for this project, it really was unique. So one of the things that we learned once we first met with the tribal council and other members of the Confederation was what was important, because as Ryan mentioned, a very different emphasis for development of the site, including cultural elements, public access, and really restoring and healing the land is their primary goal for the site. This is a site, you can see it right on the slide under the word geography. We're looking north here, you can see the falls in the foreground, but it is currently a site that has a tremendous amount of industrial heritage and buildings, and moving forward with determining what could be reused or possibly not, and restoring the site from the environmental remediation point of view, but also from its original hydrology and the way that it interacted with the river. This was a very sacred location for the tribe, and as keepers of the waterfalls, this kind of connection to the waterfront is something that they're really hoping to achieve as part of their process. And as they continue with the environmental remediation, and as the actual scape of the site is restored, that brings up a number of different development opportunities and constraints, frankly. But again, the goal was to restore the site and to heal the site, and that was really a primary goal throughout all of our planning. The tribe also has a much different and more profound view of history that, frankly, you had to really try to appreciate. So it really goes back to time immemorial, and something that really put much more of a historical significance on the site that is much deeper than what we typically look at when we come to these industrial sites. They're currently industrial, but we really had to have a much greater appreciation for how long the history on this site that we needed to appreciate as part of the planning process. And pre-development on the site was already underway. And again, the team that was leading it, as well as the consultants at the time the tribe had already hired, we almost felt in some ways that it was a peer review of the process that was already underway. Again, remediation, demolitions underway, but as also have the tribe, along with their consultants, has also done a significant amount of master planning, which you saw the vision plan document that Ryan showed. And as we kind of went forward, we looked at the highest and best use study that was done before we arrived on the project, and really reviewed that and came up with many of very similar conclusions. So one of the things that's unusual is that this really is not a typical downtown development, because of course the highest and best use plan looked at maximizing the zoning capacity and maximizing types of uses that could be on the site. And of course, that wasn't really the true goal of the tribe. Looking more specifically at these issues of healing and restoration, having tribal functions and activities on the site, as well as a tribal character to everything that happened on the site, while also inviting the public to the site, both to a nature walk that would progress through the site to connect a trail from the north to the south, as well as for other public spaces and activities to draw activity to the site. So NOI was not, net operating income and revenue was not the ultimate goal necessarily. It's an important part of it, but some other things were overriding. And again, these unique tribal cultural character and uses were one of the major outcomes of the vision study. Next slide, please. So I wanted to go through just a bit of some of the select recommendations. Some of these are fairly typical to an urban development project, but one of the things, given there was this difference between the amount of density that the tribe would like to put on the site with what the maximum was. One of the things we tried to make sure that the tribe considers is to continue to maximize the availability for the site for future generations of the tribe and for the community, because you can always use it. They've achieved a very beneficial zoning on the site, and whether or not they actually utilize all that now, given their current goal, to try to maximize that envelope for the future. We also talked a bit about phasing redevelopment. They're really, again, in this pre-development stage, but looking at how you could redevelop this site in stages. And a lot of this they had already done, but some other aspects that we talked about, we're just looking at things like construction staging. It's a dead-end site, which provides some limitations. And one of the other types of things that we looked at was possibly recommending a rock crushing operation on site, which they're doing to a certain extent now, but just to stop truck traffic that would be removing these materials from the site, as well as to reuse a lot of that material as part of their development process. We talked a lot about providing a critical use of critical mass of uses, and population on the site. Their site is right next to Oregon City, downtown Oregon City, which is a very traditional kind of Main Street development along the river. It's already, they're experiencing their own redevelopment and expansion currently. But it's one of the things that the development really needed to tie in with that development, but provide a critical mass at the end, because not only would they be having their own uses, both for tribal uses and other mixed use development that would attract others to the site, and other development to the site. This is the prime site by which to view these falls. So there will be a large tourism capacity at the site too. And one of the issues that was of great concern is, how do you park these folks? Because there's not a lot of parking in the area for the uses that are already in Oregon City, much less for the additional uses on the site, as well as tourism, that once you can see the site, we expect a tremendous amount of tourism to show up at the site as a destination. The overall layout of the site, we recommend being pedestrian oriented. Again, it's a fairly low density vision that the tribe has. And to really try to maintain, though, this Main Street street wall that continues from Oregon City to the north, and allowing setbacks above such that you can get some more density on the site without changing that kind of really low scale street level atmosphere. Next slide, please. Just a few other of our recommendations was to, again, try to keep the site as flexible and as unrestricted moving forward. And this gets back to expunging exceptions in the title report. This is, there were some constraints on the title that went back to mid-1800s. So we also as a team recommended that some of those be removed. In fact, anything that could be in old access agreements that really are no longer viable. And also some prior corporations. Again, as Ryan mentioned, there was a lot of turnover on the site based on its manufacturing use, and to try to clean the title as much as possible. I mentioned the on-site rock crushing, but also to look specifically at environmental insurance for the site, because there is remediation happening on the site. It is something that is achievable to get the site to a level of remediation that it can be reused in given the vision of the tribe, but to look at the insurance policies that could be put into place and to protect the tribe in the future from any sort of issues that may arise. Hydrology on the site is a tremendous issue because the falls are at two different levels, and the site will even invite some water through the site to connect the upper river at the top of the falls to the lower. Again, this concept of restoring the land and healing the land to some of its prior hydrology and looking at some of the flow control issues and some of the other planning that would keep certain development out of harm's way if flooding did occur. So again, trying to mix this goal of pulling kind of the natural waterways through the site that was the original function of the site, but then also maximizing the ability to create development on the site. And lastly, to salvage the industrial elements on the site. A lot of the structures were just too difficult to remove, to reuse, and were in a condition that really did not allow viable reuse. So there's a lot of other industrial elements, including tanks and foundations from old mills that are just these kind of beautiful historic foundations that could be used. And then to introduce other interpretive elements that would allow for that site to tie back to the more recent history of the industrial heritage, as well as celebrating the much longer tribal history. Next slide, please. And just a few more. So of the uses that we supported in the highest and best use analysis, and our review of that was to really look at lodging on the site, both for the tourism draw, but just because of the very unique views and viewshed that the site enjoys within a hotel with a boutique level of amenities, because Oregon City is desperately in need of more hospitality facilities. The former Mill O site, which is right on the river, and again, enjoys a beautiful view of the falls, is one of the locations that we recommended for that. And it's one of the sites that the tribe had been focusing on for this hospitality use. Restaurants and other types of retails, drawing people down from Oregon City through their main street and along to the falls, is one of the kind of underlying planning paradigms for their entire planning process. And then also the tribe would like to keep ownership of the site long-term. They've come in as the second developer after an initial developer was not successful in developing the site. The tribe came in and effectively, in my opinion, saved the day to really look at the site in a much different way and to hold it very much long-term. So for instance, rental housing was one of the things we recommended because it is something that can be compatible with the tribe's long-term interest in holding the site long-term. And lastly, the site should be reserved for tribal members, including possible tribal housing for the types of ceremony and cultural remembrances that Ryan mentioned, and creative office and maker space is something else we thought would have very compatible use at the site. So I would like to just thank CCLR for allowing the Consulting Corps to participate in this project, and to Ryan and his team and the greater Confederation of Grand Ronde for allowing us to take part in the process of restoring and healing this very important site in Oregon City. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. Ryan, great presentation. So as we wrap up, we have 7 minutes, and what I wanted to do actually is, you've heard a lot of the similarities and the differences. However, I want the folks to also hear from Graham and Christian as far as where you guys, some of the recommendations. Someone had asked if the reports are public and if they could be shared, and unfortunately, these wonderful reports are not public. So, but thank you for asking the question. But Graham, did you want to, or Christian, did you want to talk about some of the recommendations?
Yeah, I will. Also, if I may, Joelle, in my haste to give a summary, I failed to mention the members of our team. I'm going to take just 20 seconds to do that.
Absolutely, feel free.
Our team was headed by Barton DeLacy of Cushman & Wakefield, who operates in Portland and Chicago and nationwide. Michael Heaton, who is an MAI and CRE and Fricks from New York. Maribel Coella from Knoxville, Tennessee, who is a consultant with expertise in industrial. RJ Neary, who is from Omaha, Nebraska, who manages a real estate investment firm that specializes in obsolete project redevelopment. And Christina Thoresen, who is an expert in real estate valuation, focusing on industrial in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So shame on me for not mentioning them at the very beginning of my presentation, because ours was a team effort and I was probably the weakest link on the team. So I'm glad I had a chance to mention their their names, and I apologize for not doing so earlier. So in terms of recommendations, I mentioned we looked at some sort of kind of quick wins. Christian and the team had started by demolishing the building, which was just a huge eyesore. And so that was a good first step. But we talked about, a farmer's market, food truck, some music venues just to take advantage of that big pad, possibly using it for truck parking for the three operating businesses that are literally just right across the street. And then in an interim basis, we thought about possibly putting up a small spec building, a flex building with some, clean tech development, consulting offices, maker labs, things of that sort. But in terms of the longer term, we thought that it was really important to do a deep dive on financial analysis on what would really work there from a market perspective, a financial perspective, environmental condition, et cetera. So we really thought that longer term, a distribution facility. There have been talk about a lumber facility where they might manufacture, flooring and joists for housing, and some sort of more modern manufacturing that isn't as equipment intensive as the old cable wire and copper facilities. So those were among our recommendations. But Joelle, more than just sort of these specific recommendations, we really wanted to focus on a process, to focus on the financial aspects, the redevelopment aspects, with the notion that a good process will lead to a good result. So we didn't say, it should be this type of manufacturing facility. We didn't get into that kind of specificity because we thought it was more important to focus on a process to get there. Thank you.
Sure. Christian, did you want to add anything or?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Hey, can you hear me? All right.
Yeah.
I thought Graham did the right thing by introducing the team, because that's one part of this CRE process for anyone kind of out there, listening is, these teams were so exquisitely selected to tackle the problem we had. Like this team may have not been the best team for Oregon City, and their team may have not been the best team for us. So it was really great because, obviously, I love the fact that Graham had a municipal background and, the most municipal center, in North America, so he kind of saw all those, he's seen it all. So that was really great. Mike Hedden, wonderful in terms of like us kind of understanding the true value or lack thereof of the property. And one of those parts of the process, a really great tool that we walked away from, kind of a gift from CRE, I guess, was this kind of, pro forma spreadsheet where we can continue to curate, right? Because not 3 months after CRE left town, supply chain issues started really coming to the forefront, lead times, and this all lead to price increases and stuff. So when we were looking at $110 a square foot or something to construct, all of a sudden now that's 210, or at its peak was, maybe it's on at 180 now, but anyway, so being able to play with these tools as we get project leads really helped. And that's one of those things that's going to survive, for years beyond the visit, so that was that's a huge benefit. One of the other things was just by design or by coincidence, it allowed us to really focus again on this. We are all juggling 1,000 things right now. Anyone who's employed is overemployed, or oversubscribed, let's say. So this really allowed us to cut the noise out and really focus, and this team was very intensive, leading up to the visit asking questions and probing and, you know, like trying to understand so that when they could hit the ground running. So like for a couple weeks there, we kind of got our crap back together. You know, we made binders, we re-looked at our maps, we looked at our, you know, land use plans and updated them, you know, and again, re-engaged every stakeholder that we've always wanted to talk to, but never found the time, right? And we were able to get that done. So I'm gonna stop there.
No, I think those are all good points. And I think anybody who is contemplating, you know, such an endeavor, it does take courage, right? A little bit of courage to just say, okay, we're going to let, you know, these people in, right? They're great. They're there with good intentions, and to turn over the stones that you don't want to turn over, but you know you need to turn them over, and just have an objective look to say, have you thought about this, right? It's balance. Both of these projects, the word for me was balance. How do you balance needs, desires, environmental constraints, whether it's healing and restoration, whether it is NOI, whether it's economic development, whether it's a, you know, a neighborhood that's right next door that is just kind of like, we're fine with a vacant site now. We had a horrible building before, but this is great, right? So you're just, hey, Christian. And so I think it was all balance, but I would highly recommend, you know, anybody who does have a project, please reach out to Samantha, Steve Norris, Cassandra, Graham, you know, reach out to them and have a conversation. Start the conversation and explore, because there are certain times when just you're so close to the project that it's nice to get a third set of eyes to just go, are we on the right track? Or wow, we just need help. And it does take a village. So we are at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for joining us. Big kudos to Siri, everyone. Christian, Ryan, Cassandra, Graham, thank you so much for your time on this webinar. Thank you to Devin and Helen at CCLR for helping us put together the webinar. And big kudos to Samantha at CRE for putting together these wonderful teams. She knows how to put them together, and how she does it is just nothing short of magic. So big kudos to Samantha. With that, I wish everybody a great day and happy discovery with your brownfields. Until next time.
Thanks, everybody.